And it's complete pandemonium at the Novare Mall as angry youth today overpowered men of the Nigerian police force guarding the mall and consequently looting various shops at the mall.
Normalcy is just being restored around Lagos after last week's near state of lawlessness, which led to the destruction of billions of naira worth of infrastructure, not forgetting the loss of precious human lives.
The only thing that is consistent with the Nigerian story in the last 10 years has just been complete hopelessness.
The people is why Nigeria does not work. It's the people. And I think that the people, we've been mentally bastardized.
Anyone who is sitting around waiting for 2023 to fix Nigeria, I'm not afraid to say the person is a fool.
Tired. You see, we are tired. We are tired. Apart from the issue of SARS, one most important thing is that everybody is not happy. Everybody is complaining. Nobody is happy. How can somebody be taking a salary of 20,000? And you hand them over a rifle. That's the transport money to go and kill, go and rob. It's too bad.
What you can say that has been consistent in the last, not just 10 years actually, for the last several decades in Nigeria, has been a cycle of hope, amazing hope, and then busted dreams. It's gotten so bad that we've now gotten to a point where the young have been so robbed of hope that it's almost impossible for them to envision a future in the country of their birth.
Great year of 2020, the year where probably some of you have deducted from your lives. We had a pandemic raised to power 2 in Nigeria. It became the climax of anger, aggression, frustration for a lot of people that were born into a decade or season where they didn't meet a working country.
I don't like to make too much exceptionalism of Nigeria. The world is a global village, so what effectively affects young people in Nigeria, you can bet it that other countries also share similar challenges. So they are the usual suspect, the usual stuff. Issues of unemployment, issues of lack of social mobility for young people, issues of underrepresentation or lack of voice, lack of participation, lack of effective representation in decision-making processes at different layers of society. Then, issues around young people seeking to push the boundaries of what is allowed, what is not.
I mean, we've been silent, we've been quiet. We've just been adapting and taking in everything. You meet a new obstacle, you adjust. You meet something new, you adjust, because I think that's how we were trained until October 2020. There was this mass come out of people just saying, you know what, it's enough. It's time for us, we're now awake, and it's time for us to start asking questions. So October 2020 for us was a representation of what happens when people come together to ask and demand for accountability. What led to that was the common denominator, which affected most of the people in my age grade, was SARS.
Here lies the revolution, revolution. Embarked upon with little conviction, we marched through the streets, it was the fashion. So we raised our voices in great unison. We gave flight to fantasies and reason. Treason was to stop believing. Hope in the air, it was the season. Give thanks to God for he is weaving. Even at the last hour of the evening, lost in this game of self-deceiving. Bathed in the drench of sweat turned crimson. Listen, voices dispersed by the tear gas combustion. Who wants to lay down his life for this nation? So we sigh in frustration. This is my salutation. For here lies mine, revolution. 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 Revolution.
They will carry factory and march them come back. They will tell you where they pray, the last prayer. You could hear you, we just maybe just come make you beg somebody, maybe you come make you beg for somebody, or you come see and you will be your friend. You could hear say, God please accept my soul. God please accept my soul. The next way you hear say, finish. The next way you go say and carry back come out. They'll carry them, go dump one liver for one water down there. You could hear say this person they Akwuzu SARS. They go say they need 2 million, 1 million, 5 million to donate. You go donate like say, hey, I don't get them. The man I take 50. How far? You don't come out. Or then they say, after the woman, they collect up, they say the guy don't die. What do you go feel? They collect up. Say the guy don't die.
Let me start at the beginning. I must confess that before the October 2020 and all that happened with SARS, I actually knew very little about it. And the question might be why? Because I was out of the country for about 3.5 years. And I think it's during those years of being out that I think a lot of situations around SARS emerged, of young people being stopped by police, being harassed, being tormented simply because of how they look and how they behave. And I found it interesting as that began to emerge, because some of them had hair that, different kind of hair. And I do my hair like that. So I'm thinking, okay, if I didn't have white hair, will they do that to me as well,
I've had those kind of experiences. I manage artists and I work with artists that have dreads that every night, once it's 10, where are you? What are you doing? Okay, put on your location, because they get harassed or picked up at any point in time and I have to be awake to go and bail them out and stuff. So on the larger scales, this affected a whole lot of people. And what they didn't see coming was the fact that this generation, before, when we used to make noise, scantily, there was no power because we didn't have the financial resources. Right now, many of us own our businesses. We run our businesses. We pay salaries. Where, we were born into I think what people forget is that our generation was born into the entrepreneurship age. So a lot of us we're not necessarily employed. We make money from Instagram. We make money from, using our laptops and not going into office. So for them, they didn't anticipate the fact that it was going to be sustained.
This is the decade of the lions. So I felt, at the beginning of the decade, the lions are rising, the lions are releasing their sound. So SARS for me was great, fantastic. And
when the SARS thing started, I said, you, Lord, you are so good, you've woken up this generation, thank you. So that was the first effect of the SARS thing on me. And it was brilliant. It was organized, the empathy went across classes, because I think that the role that the traditional let's call them area boys and co, played in protecting that protest is a salutary statement about the thoughtfulness of the organizers and the importance of that protest to people of Nigeria across the board.
First of all, one word I would use to describe the protests is unprecedented. In my lifetime, at least, I was born in 1991. In my lifetime, I don't think I've ever experienced anything as loud, as revolutionary as the EndSARS protests. I think that they were needed at the time that they happened. And I think that it also changed the course of Nigeria's history, especially where young Nigerians are concerned.
In terms of how it was organized, much of the previous movements that I mentioned, the organization wasn't as sophisticated as EndSARS. It's a protest that had both local and foreign, physical and cyber, component. So, and quite interestingly, young people maximize the ICT tool that they have. The comparative, young people have comparative advantage, superiority over the government when it comes to tech. So they maximize it. They were able to internationalize EndSARS within a very few days of protest. So it created global awareness.
So what impressed me the most about how the protests, I would say, unfolded was, well, a few things, but the primary thing being that, one, it was organized a day at a time. It wasn't, there weren't months of let's huddle together and plan this amazing protest in October. No, it was just each day, this is what we need. This is what we need to figure out. And then I love that people volunteered as well. Doctors, nurses, lawyers who are notoriously underpaid and overworked in Nigeria, specifically in Lagos, came together to say, we are going to offer our skills and services because we know that people are going to need them. People offering buses, ambulances, things like that.
So when the whole incident started happening in October, I was excited. I was excited because I felt that this was one of the changes that the nation has been waiting for. I felt that it was time for people to speak up. And we had a generation that was beginning to agitate, want more, and they're beginning to speak up. So the reformer in me was very, very excited. I saw us being at the precipice of change.
In the beginning, I was worried. I was afraid. I know that our government's response to what is perceived as rebellion isn't always kosher. And these are young people. I mean, they're 20s, some 30s, very few, in their 40s and 50s, but primarily young. And their lives are just starting. So in as much as we applauded the bravery in the beginning, I was scared. And I know a lot of people were scared. And a lot of people who even organized the protests didn't even know what was waiting for them on the other side. So I think that fear wasn't irrational, it was a very rational fear. But then as each day kind of bled into the next, I realized that, okay, this is something important that's happening. And so fear was replaced with like a feeling of, yes, this makes sense. It then became about force, it became about power, it became about making sure our voices were heard. That historical realization that you're part of something, that's how I felt in that moment. I was like, you're part of something right now. You can actually say 10 years down the line, yeah, I was there. I went up to that toll gate to stand and to protest and to ensure that my voice was heard. It's historical.
Dreadlock does not make you a criminal. The blood of every of our youth, they tell on our government, we deserve a better Nigeria. We deserve a better government. We deserve a proper society. And what? And what?
The entirety of the EndSARS protest, unbeknownst perhaps to those who organized it, the chief instigators, was a question of citizenship. There is no way you're going to separate the demand that SARS be ended from a demand for the recognition of the citizenship of the Nigerian.
What the fuck is that? I can't walk freely in my country. Am I a foreigner? I'm a citizen. I'm a citizen. I have any fucking right to use iPhone. I have any fucking right to drive anything I want to drive. It's my personal life.
I am not sure it is possible for a police subsumed beneath the law that understands its responsibilities under the law would have acted or would be acting the way the Nigerian police acts. It's not just the SARS unit, it's the totality of the Nigerian law enforcement agencies themselves. You find that at any point in time, the life of the Nigerian is not worth much. And even when they are killed, there are no consequences for the actions of the law enforcement officers.
Na Abattoir, the kind of story we are hear about that place. If you enter that place, yes, they treat people. They treat people, even if you know be criminal, they go treat you as criminal. You get some kind punishment, or how will I even put it, sir? When you say they go too maltreat you, they go beat you well, eh?
And they want us to pass so that they can shoot us there in that fire. The fire over there. See, they come for the war. They come for the war.
That day, that fateful day of October 20th, I knew that there was trouble as soon as curfew was announced. And I had phone calls from people saying, tell the young people you know to get off the streets, tell the young people to get off the streets. Because of where we live, when the soldiers left boarding camp, they drove down one of the roads. And already, as they were driving down at about 5 p.m., they were shooting as they drove down the main roads, right? And I'm thinking, these people are already trigger happy. There's no way they're going to get to the toll gate and just watch. I knew that we were in trouble.
Shoot! Let them shoot, let them shoot.
There are now fears that there's an unconfirmed number of fatalities. Before this all started, we have reports that the CCTV cameras and all the lights at the scene were put off. And then the security operatives fired shots, resulting in people scampering to safety.
From my deck, you could literally see the toll gate. I was thrown into the word despair should not be in the lexicon of a Christian, because it's like God cannot help us. But I was close to despair when I saw that kind of thing.
Uganda has offered very good examples of what you might expect in 2023. And anyone who does not want to travel that far need only go to Lekki on the 20th of October. The power that unleashed that monstrosity on people who should be citizens, those powers are still alive and well. And if they do that in Lekki, in Lagos, you can imagine what they do where there will be no cameras, no phones, and nobody to report what happened. DJ Switch had a live feed. And Nigerians are too busy questioning the evidences of their own eyes. So you find very quickly that there is a system of complicity that has been built to sustain the impunity that we're speaking of, because it's not just the government, it's a vast majority of Nigerians, particularly the middle class, the most affected, that have been most complicit in burying the truth of what happened and denying the obvious and the evidence of their own eyes.
Well, I think it's too early to. I've not seen any serious signs of impact, as regards the government. What I've seen basically is government systemically, running an agenda to actually suppress and discourage such things from happening again. You see what's happening with persecution of people who are perceived to be leaders of the protests, seizing of passports, freezing of their accounts and all that. And I think the government wants to make a very strong statement that don't ever try this kind of thing again. And I think the citizens have to really understand what is at stake. The End SARS protest was just the beginning. It was just, a trailer, as it were. If we really want to, establish change, we have to roll up our sleeves and be ready for the long haul. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
How does Nigeria not work for you, and why does it not work?
The people is why Nigeria does not work. It's the people. And I think that the people, we've been mentally bastardized. And there's no identity. So when there's no identity, there's crisis. And how do you get identities? To trace back to where you're coming from and defining where you're going to.
Yeah, we need power to change hands, because a lot of our issues are connected to other issues. Infrastructure, connected to poverty, connected to brain drain, connected to all sorts of things. And the center of that is leadership. We need leaders that care. We need leaders who are obsessed with the future, who are obsessed with change. We don't have that. We actually don't have that.
Well, there are fundamental problems with Nigeria, very fundamental problems. And if we don't deal with them, we will not go anywhere. Part of it is the structure of the Nigerian constitution. Nigeria was designed for state capture. You see, what happened to Nigeria was that after military rule came and the civil war took place, a group of young military officers captured the Nigerian state. And the state just became an arena for the actualization of their private interests. Corruption got institutionalized in a way that would advance the cause of some people who have captured the state. Because of it, Nigeria does not perform optimally. I was involved in a study with a group of economists from Oxford, sponsored by DFID many years ago. And we're looking at graphs of the Nigerian economy late into one night. And one of them shouted, "My goodness, this is the classic recursive economy. 2 steps forward, 5 steps backwards, 2 steps forwards. Why? How does it happen like this?" I said to him, simple. Nigeria has weak institutions.
The government isn't yet prioritizing development. The political class, basically, and speaking of the federal government and state government, we have not yet prioritized the nation's development. The political class basically just exists for itself. It caters to its own need. The biggest pattern that we have seen over the years is that the Nigerian budget usually is not realistic. That's the frank way to put it.
The Nigerian system cannot be fixed. Where should the focus go as far as changing or fixing the system? The Nigerian system cannot be fixed. Nigeria exists on the bedrock of impunity. It is not subsumed beneath any law. The state itself is criminal in the shape of its current structures. So if you're really interested in changing Nigeria or fixing Nigeria, you've got to focus on changing the governance systems.
Look, change. Of course, there are so many angles to look at it, but as an individual, every time people talk change or mention change, for me, the first thing that comes to mind is the fact that you have your quota to make, to the change or for the change to happen. And this is something that there's a lot of mediocrity in this country, and we see a lot of this, and people don't address it. You can't try to build a house with very weak foundation and expect that, try to build a skyscraper and you expect that it gets up and it does not collapse.
There is no Nigeria without Nigerians. And what we call Nigeria is Nigerians, right? We are what we make the country to be. And if we say Nigeria is not working, which is the truth, every Nigerian needs to look, what am I putting forward to make Nigeria work? So people in their private spaces, in their private businesses, in government offices, are actually what we see as why Nigeria is working is an aggregate of what each person does in their private spaces as citizens of this country. You see citizens that go and, ferry narcotics. They get caught every day, it's announced. You go to a local market, Ladipo, or wherever you want to buy spare part. You get sold fake spare part, right? You give work to a car mechanic to repair. It's not changing the part for you, it's just looking for a way to defraud you. And it goes on like that. You go to a government office, somebody wants to make life difficult for you because he or she wants you to pay a bribe. This is not government. The government is building railway as they are commissioning. Some people are going to remove the tracks to go and sell. Is that government? Is that about leadership? It's about citizens' responsibility and commitment to the state.
The music of one of the legends out of Africa, Fela, and this was the same message he was preaching back in the days. The same thing he was talking about then is still going on now, and you can see how crazy the youths are right about now. You can see how angry they are now.
Until such a time as we will deprogram the minds of those who run Nigeria from thinking oil, which is where everything is hinged. And we have an entrepreneurial, enterprise-driven economy. And those people protect their interests by ensuring that the state works fairly for everybody, because that's what institutions do. They will a level playing field. Then that's when we'll have a system that runs normally. Until that happens, it's just going to be who can capture the state. Nigerian politics is about capture, who can capture the state, not who can serve the people. And so overcoming that is fundamental to any progress in Nigeria.
If you have a system that is designed to produce this, there is no way you're going to make it produce this because you're praying. You stood in front of the factory and you started praying in tongues. You were busy fasting and praying, calling fire from heaven. It wouldn't change anything. You will need to tweak the system that produces this to make it produce the thing you want it to produce. It is the same with the Nigerian system. How far can you go with 774 local governments with 36 states?
Yeah, I think we need massive citizens' participation. The current setup of our political structure, it seems as though even when you have a good intention and you probably run for office and more either at the state and national level, it is extremely difficult.
Those who really want true change should be involved. Audio, visual, content, television, social media, these are some of the things that are used to pollute and mess up the mind of the people. I use the same medium to ensure that, I put things out there that are positive. Most of these things they are intentional. It's not just about money. If you want money, then you can't be preaching positivity all the time. This is not a social media fight. It's not a social media struggle. Will come from those who are committed, and I think that is the only way.
The next litmus test is what happens next election. I would like to see young people become councillors, become local government chairmen, become members of state legislature, and building up like that, right? Changing the system is not going to happen like a flip of a switch. It's going to take careful planning, a long-term approach to things, also a vision of where we want to put Nigeria, where we want Nigeria to be, and recruiting people into that, to share into that vision, to buy into that vision.
Without having a very strong advocacy, a very strong engagement from citizens, constantly holding government accountable, constantly putting government on their toes, what we call citizenship vigilance. It is almost impossible for us, to move away from the status quo. It is important for us to constantly ask questions, engage government.
Don't let one president come and tell you change, and you don't ask them, what is the economic policy that you have for me? It's not change if you want to kill corruption. And so, every country is corrupt. What is your economic policy? What is your foreign policy? We need to start asking questions.
We get the government we deserve, right? When it comes to election, politicians distribute money. People vote on the basis of tokens, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000. A piece of akara wrapper, a bowl of rice, T-shirt, face cap, all of these things. I mean, that is very myopic. How can you trade away 4 years of service, of money, of everything? Somebody is bribing you with that. So, as citizens, we need to be able to be stronger when it comes to election, and of course, making our votes to count. But on the part of government, there are things to be done.
One of the people that I work with the founder of Fixed Politics, Dr. Obia Sekwesili, there's something she says that I love. She says that we spend more time selecting and interviewing the person who will be our shopkeeper in a supermarket than we do in electing the people who will run for office. And it's true. There's a minimum standard of intellectual prowess that you should have.
For some reason, the best people for every kind of job or responsibility or position never make it to that position. Our system does not allow us to produce or bring forward the best persons for the task at hand. And this is not just restricted to the public sector, it's also something you find also in the private sector. So mediocrity is also a major challenge. But of course, politics in Nigeria complicates everything. We have this long debate about federal character versus competence. Meaning allowing for every part of Nigeria to be represented on the one hand, which is meant to produce inclusion, which is not wrong, it's a form of affirmative action. But on the other hand, you have the challenge of competence. If we want the job done, we want the best to do it at every point in time.
The Constitution, right? I think the Constitution, first of all, needs a great overhaul, complete overhaul. The current Senate, the current House, they've said that, during the protest, they made declaration that they were going to start, the review of the Constitution. I hope that, my third child is not born by that time.
In Nigeria, we like to do the talk, but we don't do the work, right? Nation building is no easy task. It requires, a lot of hard work, a lot of planning, a lot of investment of time, of money, of resources, and also commitment. People must be committed to a project.
Even though we use precepts and concepts, and sometimes we seek to perhaps apply the same definitions that they have in other climes as though it is translatable to the Nigerian context. The reality is that the Nigerian is not a citizen. So the first thing the Nigerian needs to do is ensure that he is accorded the right of citizenship. Our quarrels, our fights is not a pro-democracy fight. If we were citizens ab initio, then we could be talking about pro-democracy. But in a situation where in a country of over 200 million people, you have multiple layers of citizenship. And I'll show you practical demonstration. If I went to Kano State today and I brought out my bottle of NSA, I'll probably have the Isba on my hands, chasing me around and probably wanting to cane me. But when I bought that NSA in Lagos, my VAT was sent to Kano to assure that that Isba is able to make sure that my right as a citizen of Nigeria under a secular constitution are curtailed. because of somebody's religious preferences.
To be effective as a leader, two things must be present, not one or the other. Both of them must be present. One is knowledge. If you don't know, you cannot lead. I mean, if you are blind and people follow you, you all end up in the ditch. Knowledge doesn't mean certificate, doesn't mean PhD, doesn't mean, but you have to have knowledge. It can be knowledge from experience, it can be knowledge from study, it can be knowledge, but you have to have knowledge. It's fundamental to leadership. If you want to know why Nigeria is a disaster, look at the people who are in leadership position. Most don't have any knowledge at all. And so the people, when the things come to them, it's a matter of whose interest or that interest, what are we? They don't even understand what it's about. That this decision means that in 10 years in the Nigerian economy, okay, let's spend 10 billion to refurbish our refineries. In 12, 15 years, few cars will be running on petrol. You just see that the people are not thinking. So it's not because they are wicked, they're just not thinking. They don't know enough to understand that what they're doing is wrong. Okay, yes, they may want to steal a little bit for the next election and all kind of nonsense, but there's a more fundamental problem. The other one is a sense of service from COVID. A sense of service. It's about sacrificial giving of yourself for the good of others. It's about empathy, such that you can feel the pain of those people and act in response to their pain. But we have a dislocated public culture in which those who are aspiring to lead don't even know how to feel the pain of others. You're not going to send armed soldiers up against kids who could be your own children if you have an empathetic soul. It's this obsession with power. Trump's purpose, power over purpose, is the bane of Nigeria's.
We have to crack the code of governance in Nigeria. Otherwise, we're getting to the point where the center would not be able to hold. When you look at what's going on, around the country right now, we are just literally sitting on a keg of gunpowder. And I believe that urgent steps need to be taken. And I want to speak to my own generation, the younger generations, the millennial, the Gen Z, and whatever classifications that we like to call ourselves. It is time to unite and fight the system. It is important. The way the system is currently designed, the system is not designed for us. It is not designed for the average citizens to prosper or to rise or to thrive. The system is designed to cater to itself.
I'm passionate to listening to this young man called Naira Marley. There is one slogan that I picked up from him. We won't run away from them. They will run away from us. And the only way they run away from us is when we have sat down and then bridge the many gaps that they have used to divide us. The religious divides, the ethnic divides. There are more Liverpool supporters in Nigeria than Nigerians, simply because the Nigerian state and its rulers have ensured that the people never come together as one.
In my opinion, SARS hasn't failed. SARS has ignited something significant that may look like it's quiet now. But you know, like how a volcano is simmering, and then one day it explodes, it's going to keep exploding. And I'm hoping that every explosion will be louder and louder and louder till, you know what, we silence the voices of the old and those who pursue status quo, simply because the strength of the voice of the new is so loud that the old has no choice but to be quiet, silenced, and made totally irrelevant.
If those of us who still believe that Nigeria is salvageable shall fail, I am afraid for what is coming, because what kept us from violence, what kept my own generation from violence, were our hopes, illusory as they might have proven to be. But the generation behind us watched those hopes being torn away from us one by one, and they have no illusions of any hope. Nigeria will do very well to listen and find a peaceful way out of this mess.
It was important that the SARS phenomenon happened. One thing, in spite of how it ended, one thing that it tells you is that the possibilities remain in Nigeria in spite of our troubles. Right in front of this building, there's a tree that was planted. We're going to plant it by the toll gate. But because of all the heat and all of that, we planted it right in front of this. That is to remind us always about the sacrifice that young Nigerians made and the belief that their country can be better. And many of them are getting on aeroplanes, especially the most talented amongst them, most best educated, and heading to Canada on a daily basis. But ultimately, this country is redeemable. And I believe that they or their children will be the ones that will save Nigeria, the generation that left town. And if anything, NSAS is what will keep the flame in their hearts wherever in the world they've moved.
If you have the opportunity to join Nigerian police, will you join?
No.
Why?
They are very bad, they are very corrupt, that is why I can't join them.
I prefer taking the risk. I will leave this country.
Way too much to go back now.